Hi everybody, Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, and today's video tip is more of a point of practice tip on communication. So just a couple of reminders for you is when you are working in a real estate transaction, there are a myriad of people with whom you must communicate. Your client, your broker, the co-op agent, the closing attorney, the lender, the appraiser, the inspector, so forth and so on and so on. So I just want to, again, remind you when you are communicating with these people that you, number one, make sure that communication is happening and that they receive your communication, especially with your own client or customer and the co-op agent. So what do I mean by that? Well, even from the very beginning, if you email an offer to a listing agent, you want to call and follow up, call, text, whatever, follow up to make sure that they have received the offer. If there's a counter offer process going back and forth, you want to follow up, make sure those documents are being received. When there is earnest money that is remitted to the holder, you need to follow up both sides of a transaction to make sure that the holder received those funds and deposited those funds. So as you guys have heard me say repeatedly in a number of classes, I am not a huge proponent of texting in a professional real estate transaction. It is not necessarily considered written communication and may not support you should you have to be able to prove written communication in front of a judge or an arbitrator or a broker or GREC or an ethics committee. So, but I also understand that there are some public clients and customers with whom you interact that prefer text. And some agents you text to coordinate showing instructions and so forth and so on. Whenever there is meaningful conversation or communication that must happen and you are going back and forth by text, make sure to always follow up with an email. This is also true of verbal communication. So many people have stopped using the phone. So I highly suggest that you also call and follow up with an email if there is meaningful communication with respect to the contract. In other words, you have a phone conversation with your client and or with a co-op agent. I want you to then hang up, turn around, sit down, type an email that says, "Thank you so much for the conversation today, October, whatever, at whatever time. Just want to follow up. The nature of our conversation was blah, 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 blah." Put down your best understanding of the nature of that phone call. Then, this is the key, at the bottom, put, "If you understood our conversation to be anything different than what I have just explained, please respond back." Therefore, you have a written, you have an email that documents the nature of that conversation. And if there was any difference in what was heard, what was understood on that phone call, you are providing the other person with the opportunity to respond back in writing that they heard something or they understood the nature of that conversation to be something different. So that's following up a text message or a phone call with an email. Again, just printing out your text messages on an email does not constitute written communication. The other item that I want to, a couple more things. If you guys are binding on the GAR or the RE, GAR, Georgia Association of Realtors, or RE Forms contracts, if you are actually sending notice per the contract, just a reminder, we've talked about this in a number of videos and classes. Just a reminder, that notice must be in writing, signed by the party. The party is the buyer or the seller. Agent-to-agent email does not bind the parties and has no bearing on the contract. And notice, agent-to-agent notice, does not constitute notice per those contracts. Notice must be sent legibly. It must be legible, in writing, and signed by the party. And if you are sending notice electronically, i.e. through email, it must be sent to the email address that is on the signature page of the purchase and sale agreement. So if a public person is being represented by a broker as a client, notice to the broker serves as notice to the client. There's a few exceptions if it's designated agency or dual agency. If the broker is working with the public person as a customer, then you must send notice to the customer, him or herself. So just wanted to remind you about that. The other thing, just one more thing. If you are communicating with the parties via email, and then you have to send them a document, you need to make sure that that person understands how that document is being sent. And what I mean by that is your method of communication, even through email, may change depending on what it is that you're communicating. For example, you might communicate with your customer, client, co-op agent, whomever, via email and send them a PDF attachment of the documentation. Or you may communicate with your person via email and send them documentation via an e-sign program through FMLS, via an e-sign program through Transaction Desk and Georgia MLS, via DocuSign, there are a number of e-signature programs, or through, sending something if the documentation is too big, through a Dropbox or through a Google link or something like that. And here's the key. The key is sometimes, even though you're emailing, the methodology by which you're sending documentation might change. So you could be sending your client something let's say it's a PDF attachment, and then you have to send them something else. And so you send it to them through the e-sign program, through RDocs or Remind Docs. Well, the receiving party may not be on the lookout to receive that communication through that method. So they might ignore that email. Let's face it, you guys, we are all inundated by emails right now. So if you are used to seeing an email one way and all of a sudden you get an email with something to sign a different way, you might delete it or ignore it or not realize what it is. So the point of practice for this video tip is just please make sure to follow up with any communication that you have in more than one way. So if you are emailing, especially documentation that needs to be signed or received, you want to follow up with a phone call or follow up with a text that says, hey, I just emailed you a document. Please let me know that you received it. Instead of sending it as a PDF attachment on my email, I sent it through another program, and it's probably going to look like this. So just a tip, communication tip for you to pay attention to throughout your real estate transactions. I hope this video helped you out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Dana Sparks, broker of Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education.